Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed that just before life begins to change, everything seems to become unusually quiet? The calls slow down. The opportunities seem to disappear. The excitement fades. Even the dreams that once felt so close begin to feel distant, as if the universe has suddenly forgotten your address. And in those moments, the mind starts asking dangerous questions. What if nothing is happening? What if I was wrong to believe? What if I've wasted all this time? Most people never realize that these questions don't appear because reality has stopped moving. They appear because the old version of you is beginning to lose its grip. There is a strange moment that almost everyone experiences before a major transformation. It feels like standing in complete stillness. Nothing seems to be changing on the outside, yet something deep within you refuses to return to who you used to be. That space can feel uncomfortable. It can feel lonely. It can even feel like failure. But what if that silence isn't empty? What if it is full? What if what feels like delay is actually preparation? By the end of our time together, you're going to see why life's quietest seasons often come before its greatest breakthroughs. You'll understand why the moments that convince people to quit are often the very moments they should remain steady. More importantly, you'll discover how your inner world determines whether this season becomes the beginning of something extraordinary or simply another cycle of doubt. Because change rarely announces itself with noise. It usually arrives quietly. Imagine planting a seed in rich soil. You cover it with earth, water it faithfully, and then nothing. Day after day, the ground looks exactly the same. If someone judged the seed only by what they could see, they would assume nothing was happening. But beneath the surface, everything is happening. Roots are spreading. The shell is breaking apart. Life is organizing itself in complete darkness. The seed is not failing because it cannot yet be seen. It is becoming, in many ways, your life follows the same rhythm. We often believe progress should always be visible. We expect constant evidence that our efforts are paying off. We look for immediate confirmation that our thoughts, decisions, and dreams are leading somewhere meaningful. But the deepest transformations are rarely visible at first. The person you're becoming begins changing long before your circumstances reflect it. That is why so many people stop just before life begins to unfold differently. They mistake invisible progress for no progress. The greatest obstacle isn't time, it is interpretation. Two people can experience the same season of waiting. One concludes that life is against them. The other quietly believes that unseen pieces are falling into place. Months later, their lives look completely different, not because one was luckier, but because one protected their inner direction while the other surrendered it. The mind naturally searches for certainty. It wants guarantees before it continues believing. It wants proof before it commits. Yet almost everything meaningful in life asks for trust before evidence. Think about learning to walk. No child succeeds because they never fall. They succeed because falling never becomes their identity. Each attempt teaches balance. Each stumble strengthens coordination. Eventually, walking feels natural. The same principle applies to every inner transformation. Your assumptions about yourself slowly become the lens through which you experience the world. If you quietly carry the belief that life always disappoints you, your attention becomes highly skilled at collecting disappointment. If you begin carrying the quiet expectation that life supports your growth, your attention starts noticing opportunities that previously seemed invisible. The world hasn't necessarily changed overnight. Your awareness has. And awareness changes experience. Many people spend years trying to change circumstances. Without realizing, they are constantly rehearsing the same internal conversations. They wake up expecting another difficult day. They replay old disappointments. They imagine conversations ending badly before they even happen. Then they wonder why life continues presenting familiar patterns. The mind loves familiarity. Even painful familiarity often feels safer than unfamiliar possibility. That is why genuine transformation often feels uncomfortable before it feels rewarding. You are not simply changing outcome. You are changing identity. Identity is powerful because it quietly influences every choice you make. Someone who sees themselves as confident walks into a room differently than someone who believes they never belong. Someone who believes they are worthy receives kindness differently than someone convinced they must earn every ounce of love. Notice something interesting. Life often mirrors what you repeatedly accept about yourself, not perfectly, not instantly, but consistently over time. Imagine standing before a mirror. You wouldn't expect your reflection to smile before you do. You understand that the reflection responds. Yet many people expect life to change first, so they can finally feel hopeful. They wait for success before feeling capable. They wait for love before feeling lovable. They wait for abundance before feeling secure. What if that order has always been backward? What if the inner shift quietly invites the outer response? This doesn't mean pretending difficulties don't exist. It means refusing to let temporary appearances define permanent beliefs. A cloudy morning doesn't erase the existence of the sun. It only changes what your eyes can presently observe. In the same way, difficult seasons don't necessarily describe the direction of your life. They describe one chapter, nothing more. There is another reason life sometimes appears to slow down before everything changes. Old patterns begin losing energy. Imagine a river flowing through the same path for decades. Its direction becomes familiar. Now imagine gently redirecting that river. The water doesn't instantly create a new channel. It presses, it gathers, it meets resistance. Eventually, the landscape changes. Your mind works similarly. Every repeated thought creates familiarity. Every familiar emotion strengthens expectation. When you begin thinking differently, you are not fighting reality. You are patiently creating a new path. At first, the old current feels stronger. Old doubts return. Old fears speak louder. Not because you're failing, because habits rarely disappear without reminding you they once existed. Instead of fearing those moments, observe them. Notice them without becoming them. You are allowed to hear an old thought without treating it as truth. One simple question can change everything. Who would I be if I no longer believed this story? Sit with that question. Don't rush to answer. Sometimes transformation begins not with finding a new belief, but with releasing an old certainty. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack for years. Eventually, the weight feels normal. Only after setting it down do you realize how much energy it required. Old identities work the same way. I'm always overlooked. Nothing ever works out. I'm too late. I've missed my chance. These ideas become emotional habits. They don't simply influence your thoughts. They influence your posture, your tone, your decisions, your expectations. Now imagine replacing those quiet assumptions with different ones. I am becoming someone who notices opportunity. I trust that unseen progress is unfolding. I don't need constant proof to continue growing. Notice that these statements aren't forced optimism. They are directions. Like a compass, they keep your inner world aligned, even when the landscape appears uncertain. Think about climbing a mountain. Halfway up, the summit often disappears behind clouds. If you judged your progress only by what you could see, You might believe you had wandered off course, but altitude is still increasing. The path is still rising. The destination still exists. Sometimes faith is simply continuing to climb, while the clouds temporarily hide the view. This applies to relationships, to careers, to healing, to creativity, to every meaningful dream. Growth is rarely dramatic while it is happening. Most people recognize transformation only after looking backward. One day you realize the things that once upset you no longer control your emotions. You notice that fear no longer makes your decisions. You speak differently. You think differently. You respond instead of react. That is real progress. Not because the world forced you to change, because you quietly became someone new. So how do you live during these slower seasons? Begin each morning before the world tells you who you are. Spend a few quiet moments imagining the kind of person you are becoming. Not the possessions you want, not the applause you hope to receive. The person feel what calm confidence feels like. Feel quiet gratitude before circumstances demand it. Carry that feeling into ordinary moments. When you're standing in line, driving to work, making coffee, walking outside. Transformation doesn't require extraordinary moments. It is built inside ordinary ones. Throughout the day, notice your inner conversation. If your mind begins predicting disappointment, gently interrupt it, not with force, with curiosity. Ask yourself, is this the only possible future? Most of the time, the answer is no. In the evening, resist replaying everything that went wrong. Instead, revisit one beautiful moment from the day, no matter how small. A smile, a peaceful breath, a kind word, a moment of laughter. Teach your mind to recognize evidence of possibility rather than constantly collecting evidence of limitation. Little by little, your emotional home begins changing. And when your emotional home changes, your relationship with life changes. Remember the gardener. After planting seeds, they don't dig them up every morning to check whether they're growing. They water, they care, they trust the process. Impatience has never made a flower bloom faster. Neither has fear. Life has rhythms that cannot be rushed. Winter never apologizes for taking its time. Spring never arrives because people demand it. Each season unfolds according to a deeper intelligence. Perhaps your life has been asking you for the same patience. Perhaps this slower season is not punishment. Perhaps it is preparation. One day you'll look back and realize the silence wasn't empty. It was shaping you. The waiting wasn't wasted. It was strengthening your roots. The uncertainty wasn't your enemy. It was inviting you to discover a steadiness that circumstances could never give you. And maybe the greatest transformation was never the new opportunity, the new relationship, or the new achievement. Maybe the greatest transformation was becoming the kind of person who no longer needed constant evidence in order to believe that life was still moving in a beautiful direction. Because when that changes, everything changes. So if today feels unusually quiet, if progress seems invisible, if life appears to have slowed to a pace you don't understand, don't rush to call it the end of your story. Some of the most meaningful chapters begin in silence. Some of the strongest foundations are built where no one can see them. And some of life's greatest changes arrive so gently that you only recognize them after they've already transformed you. Stay steady. Stay present. Keep nurturing the person you are becoming. The world outside will eventually reflect what has been patiently growing within. And when that day comes, you'll realize that nothing was ever standing still. It was all becoming. There is a quiet confidence that begins to grow when you stop measuring your life by daily evidence. Most people never experience that confidence because they have trained themselves to believe that every day must bring a visible sign that they are moving forward. If today feels better than yesterday, they believe they're succeeding. If today feels uncertain, they assume something has gone wrong. But life has never moved in straight lines. Look closely at nature, and you'll see that almost everything meaningful follows cycles rather than constant acceleration. The ocean doesn't send every wave farther than the last one. The moon doesn't remain full every night. Even your own breathing depends on expansion and release. Imagine trying to inhale forever. Eventually, what gives you life would become the very thing that overwhelms you. Perhaps your journey follows that same wisdom. Perhaps the slower moments are not interruptions. Perhaps they are part of the rhythm that allows lasting change to take root. One of the greatest misunderstandings about personal transformation is the belief that every difficult emotion means you have moved backward. Have you ever noticed that just when you decide to become a calmer person, situations suddenly appear that test your patience? Or when you finally choose to believe in yourself, old doubts seem louder than ever. Many people interpret this as failure. It isn't. Awareness often increases before freedom does. Imagine walking into a room that has been dark for years. The moment you turn on the light, you don't create the dust. You simply become able to see what was already there. The same thing happens within your own mind. When you begin observing your thoughts more carefully, you may feel as though negativity has increased. In reality, your awareness has increased. That awareness is not your enemy. It is the beginning of wisdom, because you cannot gently reshape what you refuse to notice. There is another subtle habit that quietly steals peace from so many people. They keep postponing their happiness. I'll finally relax when I get the promotion. I'll feel secure when my bank account reaches a certain number. I'll believe in myself when other people recognize my value. Notice what those thoughts have in common. Every one of them places your inner state at the mercy of external events. And external events are always changing. If your peace depends on circumstances remaining perfect, your peace will always feel temporary. Real stability begins when you understand that your inner atmosphere can exist independently of today's conditions. That doesn't mean ignoring challenges. It means refusing to hand over your emotional foundation to things you cannot completely control. Think about a lighthouse standing on a rocky shore. Storms come, waves crash, winds howl. Yet the purpose of the lighthouse isn't to stop the storm. Its purpose is to remain steady within it. Your consciousness can become like that, not because life becomes easier overnight, but because your center no longer moves every time the weather changes. This shift may seem small, yet it changes everything. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You begin asking, who am I choosing to become through this experience? That single question transforms every challenge into an opportunity for deeper understanding. The circumstance may remain the same for a while, but your relationship with it changes immediately. And once your relationship changes, your choices begin changing. Then your habits begin changing. Eventually, your results begin changing. Transformation rarely begins at the finish line. It begins with one quiet decision that no one else can see. There is a reason sculptors don't become discouraged by a rough block of stone. They are able to imagine the finished work before anyone else can. Each careful movement removes only a small piece. If someone walked past after the first few hours, they might wonder why so little had changed. The sculptor understands something they do not. Masterpieces are revealed gradually. Perhaps your life is asking for the same patience. You don't need to become a completely different person in a single week. You simply need to become a little more aligned today than you were yesterday. one calmer response, one kinder inner conversation, one decision made from confidence instead of fear. Those moments seem insignificant while you're living them. But years later, you'll realize they quietly redirected the entire course of your life. This is why comparing yourself to others is such a dangerous habit. You are comparing visible outcomes with invisible journeys. You don't know what beliefs another person has had to overcome. You don't know how many quiet mornings they spent rebuilding their confidence. You don't know how many invisible victories happened long before the visible success appeared. Comparison only distracts you from the only journey you can truly influence, your own. Instead of asking whether you're ahead or behind someone else, ask a different question. Am I becoming more peaceful than I used to be? Am I responding with greater wisdom than I did a year ago? Am I learning to trust myself a little more? Those questions measure real growth because the quality of your life is shaped less by what happens around you than by the person experiencing it. And perhaps that is the deepest shift of all. When your identity changes, the future no longer feels like something you have to chase. It becomes something you naturally grow into. You stop forcing. You stop proving. You stop living as though every day is an emergency. Instead, you begin moving with quiet certainty, knowing that what is deeply rooted within you will eventually find its expression without. That is why everything can appear to slow down right before it all changes. Not because life has forgotten you, but because something stronger than urgency is being formed within you. And when that inner foundation is finally ready, the changes that once seemed impossible often arrive with a simplicity that surprises you, because what looked like stillness was never stillness at all. It was preparation. And when that preparation has done its work, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop chasing every answer. You stop needing every detail to make sense. You stop believing that uncertainty is automatically a sign that something is wrong. Instead, you begin to trust a quieter wisdom. You understand that not everything valuable arrives with loud announcements. Some of the greatest moments of your life will appear like ordinary days until you look back years later and realize that everything changed because of one small decision, one new belief, or one courageous moment when you refused to give up. That is the hidden power of inner transformation. It rarely asks you to become someone else. It asks you to remember who you are beneath the fear, beneath the doubt, beneath the stories you've carried for years. Perhaps you've spent too much of your life trying to convince yourself that you're enough. Maybe you believed you had to earn peace, earn love, earn abundance, earn the right to dream. But what if your greatest breakthrough begins the moment you stop trying to earn what has always belonged to your deepest self? Imagine waking tomorrow with one simple assumption. Not that every problem has disappeared, not that every goal has already arrived, but that life is quietly working with you instead of against you. Notice how different your day would feel. You would speak differently. You would notice opportunities instead of obstacles. You would meet people without carrying invisible fear. You would make decisions with more clarity because your mind would no longer be clouded by constant resistance. This is how change begins, not through force, not through endless effort, but through a steady shift in perception. Life often responds to the person you consistently believe yourself to be. So become someone who expects growth. Become someone who remains peaceful during uncertainty. Become someone who understands that temporary silence is not permanent absence. Every sunrise begins in darkness. Every flower breaks through the soil after spending time where no one can see it. Every river reaches the ocean because it keeps flowing, not because it rushes. You are no different. Your journey has its own rhythm, its own timing, its own quiet intelligence. So if today feels slower than you expected, don't mistake the silence for abandonment. Don't assume that because you cannot see movement, movement has stopped. Some of the most important changes are invisible until they become impossible to ignore. One day you'll realize your confidence no longer depends on other people's opinions. Your peace no longer depends on perfect circumstances. Your hope no longer depends on constant evidence. That is true freedom, because once your inner world becomes steady, the outer world loses its power to define you. And ironically, that is often when life begins opening doors that once seemed permanently closed, not because you forced them open, but because you became the person who could walk through them. So take a deep breath, release the pressure to have everything figured out today. Trust the small steps. Trust the quiet seasons. Trust the unseen growth taking place within you. You don't have to rush the sunrise. You don't have to pull on the seed to make it grow. And you don't have to fear the silence before the next chapter begins. Everything may feel slower than you expected, but sometimes life slows your footsteps so your spirit can catch up with your future. Remember this whenever doubt begins to whisper that nothing is changing. The deepest roots grow in darkness. The strongest mountains are shaped over time. The calmest oceans have survived countless storms, and the most extraordinary lives are often transformed long before anyone else can see the difference. So keep believing, keep becoming, keep choosing the version of yourself that already lives with quiet confidence, gratitude, and peace. Because one day, without warning, you'll look around and realize the life you were waiting for didn't suddenly appear. It grew naturally from the person you patiently became. And in that moment, you'll understand the truth that was guiding you all along. Everything slows down right before it all changes. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this message spoke to something deep within you, carry it with you today. Let it become more than an inspiring idea. Let it become the way you see yourself, the way you meet each new day, and the way you walk through every season of life. Because the future is not created by fear. It is shaped by the quiet certainty you choose to hold today. Until next time, remember, the life you are becoming is already finding its way to you, one unseen step at a time.